What is up, and welcome to Market Psychology 101, where we look for value in the markets when there's fear and are cautious when there's greed. In today's video, we are going to be talking all about Bitcoin dominance and where I believe we are at this point in the cycle. Now, as far as fear and greed goes, we are in deep fear territory. However, we can see that fear bottomed out and we are making a series of higher highs and higher lows. As far as almanac and seasonality data is concerned, you can see here that we had a very negative November, and the last handful of times we've had a very negative November with a somewhat negative December to follow. That was the actual bottom of the cycle in 2022 and 2018. 2019, which I compare our current market conditions to, that's when we saw the Fed switch over from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing and eventually saw our way up into the end of the cycle. Now, as I talk about all things Bitcoin dominance related today, I want to just remind you of my thesis on the market. My thesis is to follow the money flow. And right now, we are in phase 2 Ethereum year. And there are a lot of people out there who rightfully so believe in the 4-year cycle. They see this pattern of 4-year tops from 2013, 2017, 2021. They look at that and they say, you know what, we just had another 4-year top around there, cycle's over. That is not my theory. My theory goes more so off this log regression, how we see bottoms to tops stretch out each cycle more over time, and how that fits in nicely with our flow of money. So that is to say that this cycle, we are not done yet. I believe there is going to be more of a top later on in the cycle rather than quarter 4 of the post-halving year. Even last cycle in 2021, we had our alt season in an earlier part of the cycle as per usual. So anyways, that's the thesis of which I operate. You're welcome to disagree, but that is going to shape the lens of how I view Bitcoin dominance today. And speaking of Bitcoin dominance, let's just jump into it. So overall, you can see here that this has been in a macro uptrend for a while. Bitcoin dominance did get a bit extended at 66% and came down to a base level of 57.3%. Now, if you're new to crypto, really quick, what Bitcoin dominance means is that out of all the money that exists there in the crypto world, 59% of it is in Bitcoin. So in the past, when we've seen a rotation, a massive rotation out of Bitcoin dominance, this has signaled the end of the Bitcoin peak as well as a rotation into alts. And when people have positioned themselves in some more higher risk assets, I mean, all of crypto is speculative tech and high risk to an extent. We'll get into that, by the way. But when you are in altcoins, you're in even higher risk, and that's where people sometimes see these 10x, 20x gains in a very short period of time. We can overlay Bitcoin on this chart, and to no one's surprise, you'll see how Bitcoin peaks with Bitcoin dominance. You can see that there in 2017, Bitcoin peaked with Bitcoin dominance. Even here, remember the 2019 comparison, that was the mid-cycle top, happened a little bit before that peak. And then we saw Bitcoin peak yet again. This was April 21, even though there was that classic 4-year cycle top later. This was where alt season happened. And we can see that reflected by just taking a look at our number one altcoin, that being Ethereum. And I want you to notice how Ethereum peaks much later after we get that rotation. Ethereum does dang near a 2x in these moments when we've had these massive rotations. So remember, Bitcoin topped somewhere over here. Ethereum topped about a month or so later. So bringing it all back to this chart as far as my theory on the markets, remember that Bitcoin, or as far as alt season, that does not happen until Bitcoin tops and is too expensive to keep buying. Now, you can go to sites like CoinGlass, a great site here. I highly recommend just Google bull market peak indicators. There's nothing to show that we have topped as far as this cycle, that Bitcoin is too expensive to keep buying, and ergo we're going to see a massive rotation. Now, on this rainbow chart, whether you like this rainbow chart or not, these log regressions do show a trend of descending peaks. So even conservatively, for a while, I've been talking about these orange zones being the next logical conclusion of where we could see a top. And you see those orange boxes somewhere between 150 to 200K. Let's just say 200K, roughly around there, would be an area where we could expect a euphoric top. Now, we are far away from that. Bitcoin would need to do a 2x from there. And I've maintained on this channel for a long time that, even if we take a look at our Fibonacci retracement, let's get rid of Ethereum in the background here, that at minimum, in order to see an alt season, we would probably have to see at least the 2618 fib get hit. That is at the 155K area. We can even overlay a log regression on the weekly scale, and we can see that where these tops have been when we've had these rotations into alt season, it's been around the midline of this log regression, which is right at 155K as well. So it doesn't have to be perfect on the spot. Few things in crypto are, but that would be something to watch for as far as the alt season perspective. But how about Bitcoin dominance today? What is Bitcoin dominance doing as far as trend wise? Now, I think it's important to take a look at this historically and see that this is somewhat of a relatively newerish chart compared to stocks out there. You can see the 200-week moving average. It only goes as far back as early 2018, but what we can see here is that last cycle, the 100-week moving average was pretty much the line in the sand. You can see here the 100-week moving average was tested. Bitcoin dominance made that into support, showed it as bullish, ran into the 200 not once, but twice. And once it broke underneath the 100-week moving average here, we were on our way to alt season. Now, as this asset, or not asset, but as this chart has matured a little bit, we are going to then see that move towards some of the shorter moving averages. So the next ones would be the 20, that's the red line, and the 50. Now the 50 classically is the line in the sand between being bullish and bearish. And right now we do see Bitcoin dominance squeezing between the 100 and the 50. So looks like a big move is charging up either way. Let me get a sip of my coffee. But we can see that Bitcoin dominance has broken that bullish trend and has come down. So overall, this is, if you're ever invested in an asset and it's just riding the 20, that's fantastic. Sometimes you get the 50, but as long as you maintain a bull trend, that's a great dip to buy. Any of the 20s, the 50s. Here it peaked out, and now we are overall in this downtrend. So you might be asking yourself, well, how could we get an alt season? What is needed for an alt season? Well, the 4-year cyclists, that time has come and gone. But we can even just look by structure, as far as the structure breaking down. And again, Bitcoin being too expensive to buy, is there any indication that we might be getting towards even more high risk or risk on territory? And I'm going to tie this into a couple charts right here. One would be the United States Central Bank balance sheet. And recently you may have heard that the Fed has ended quantitative tightening. They did this in 2019 when we coincidentally hit this 100-month moving average. They have ended quantitative tightening right now. That doesn't mean they're going immediately to QE. And as far as how much quantitative easing they're going to do, whether a little or a lot, remains to be seen. I would be more so looking for something like what we saw here between 2009 to 2012, or even this blip right here. This massive amount of liquidity injection happened after COVID because the economy was it wasn't just having cracks. Things were breaking, and of course this was a great financial crisis where they injected all that liquidity. So unless something breaks in the economy and you see the Fed cutting by 50 basis points, we're not going to see QE to this level. I'd be somewhat more conservative in my outlook on that. However, QE has been bullish for crypto in the past. We can take off these moving averages and we can just overlay, or actually let's go to Ethereum Bitcoin. I like this more. We can overlay the United States Central Bank balance sheet in the background, and we can see that last cycle. Let's move over to the weekly. We can see that last cycle, Ethereum's value against Bitcoin. Now, by the way, ETH Bitcoin, that's at 0.22. That means that Ethereum's market cap is 22% that of Bitcoin. 400 billion is 22% of 1.8 trillion. All right, good. Glad we got that out of the way. But Ethereum's valuation against Bitcoin bottomed out here in late 2019. Remember those 2019 comparisons I talked about? We go forward to today. You can see how Ethereum, the number one altcoin, how this was moving up. And by the way, here is alt season. We get alt season when we get Ethereum's pairing against Bitcoin going above 0.25 towards 4.5 area. You can see ETH Bitcoin following the quantitative tightening trend. But now quantitative tightening has come to an end, but we have a bottom up here, not down here. So what does this tell me? That when I look at this, I wonder, and I ask myself, why would Ethereum be going up against Bitcoin, even though quantitative tightening did not end at the same point? And one of my main sort of background thesis, as far as the market overall, is that we are in a bubble, and it is very risk on. People are buying into speculative tech assets, Bitcoin mining stocks, AI data center stocks. We talk about that on the channel. Some of these do a little bit of both. Subscribe to hear more about that. But when we take a look at the Shiller P ratio for the SP 500, we are in bubble territory, and we have not been in bubble territory this much since the dot-com bubble. Now, even though we are in a bubble, when we first got a Shiller P above 40, we still had 400 days to go and another 25% up. Now, this is just my personal belief. I believe that the AI market, or the potential of AI, is even greater than what we saw with the internet boom, the dot-com bubble. So I believe that this bubble might get even bigger than what we saw in the late 90s. That remains to be seen. But either way, even if you want to take a more tame approach, or a conservative approach, if you will, you might say, you know what if we just say it's about the same? Well, again, we could still have a year to go, and we are near the end of a very secular bull run where people are buying into speculative assets. They're going to be buying into things equivalent to pets.com back in the late 90s. And what better place to buy into speculative tech assets than that of crypto with some of our altcoins? Let's be honest, a lot of these, you're not buying it because it's going to help your daily life. You're buying it so you can try to sell it at a higher price and make some quick money. I know why a lot of you are here. So bringing this all back to Bitcoin dominance, the question is then asked, are we in a macro risk on time, or is it going to be more risk on? Well, we just talked about how with the quantitative tightening ending, the Fed is going to inject more liquidity. So that is going to, that is inflationary monetary policy, and that is going to, over time, increase even the already high level of risk that is going to go into the market. If the Fed is moving to QE while they're doing rate cuts, when our markets are already at or this close to all-time highs, that could even put it into overdrive. And as you can see here from this S&P 500 chart, that shows, let's get rid of that in the background, that shows how the market has moved up in this channel ever since the great financial crisis. The upper area of this channel, if things got really overblown, would be in the high 7,000s. Seems crazy, but this market can get even more risk on. Another risk on metric to watch would be the IWM, the iShares Russell 2000 ETF. This is a great way to measure risk in the markets. And what we see is the Russell 2000 having a break up here into all-time highs back in September of this year, and it looks like it wants to be going even further. And funny enough, when you take a look at IWM in the background of, let's do Ethereum Bitcoin. And by the way, Ethereum Bitcoin is it's the shadow of Bitcoin dominance. We can take a look at Bitcoin dominance in the background, and it's pretty much an inverse chart. You can see the inverse relationship right here. So as Bitcoin dominance goes down, Ethereum, Bitcoin, our altcoins are going up. When Bitcoin dominance starts to go up, we have Ethereum, Bitcoin going down, all right? So when I'm talking about Ethereum, Bitcoin, I am talking about Bitcoin dominance as well. But let's add on IWM, iShare, Russell 2000, and you also see somewhat of a correlation here as well. You can see that as the Russell was breaking above former all-time highs back here, that Ethereum, Bitcoin, or the higher risk crypto assets fell not too much later. Now, we are in a similar environment right now. We see Ethereum, Bitcoin formerly or breaking past former all-time highs. And so if IWM continues to go up, then that would be another catalyst for Ethereum, Bitcoin to continue going up as well. We can see that even reflected here. I mean, look at that nice inverse relationship with Bitcoin dominance and the Russell 2K. We can see that inverse relationship right here. I even think one of the best correlations is that with Total 3. Now, Total 3, that is the total crypto market cap outside of Bitcoin and ETH. You add up all the market cap, all the crypto assets, it's around 872 billion. And you can see here again, when the Russell 2000 broke above former all-time highs, look where Total 3 was. It was all the way down here. Now, alt season did not truly kick in the overdrive until Total 3 was breaking past its former all-time high, which was here in February 21. You see it right here, and then we just had a few months further up to go. But we have a strong correlation there. What do we see going on right now? We see a divergence of Total 3 moving up into or past all-time highs, and we see or the Russell 2K moving past former all-time highs here, and we have Total 3 bottoming out at the 786, all right? Take a deep breath. Talked about a lot. So if we see this divergence, and if my thesis is correct that the 4-year cycle is broken and that we are going to follow the flow of money, what this is telling me, guys, is that should we start to see bullishness return into the market soon, I would be buying these divergences. I'm not telling you any financial advice, but I take a look at this and I'm looking for deals in my favorite altcoins. I'm looking for discounts in my favorite altcoins. Of course, I want to be a smart investor and make sure there's good strength, good price structure, but that is something I'm looking for. So overall, we've taken a look at two factors in the market. We've taken a look at the Russell 2000, showing that's when the stock market's risk on. That's breaking up further into all-time highs. We took a look at the United States Central Bank balance sheet. We know that's switching to quantitative easing. Are there any metrics on Bitcoin dominance to show that, you know what, this thing wants to go down? It wants to go in a macro negative direction. Well, believe it or not, there is. We're on the weekly time frame right here, and one of the indicators I have on right here is the MACD, the moving average convergence divergence. This shows where the strength wants to pull. You can see, watch the moving averages here. You can see how the strength here is just pulling Bitcoin dominance up. However, when the moving averages and the MACD is moving lower, you can see that how that eventually brings it down. Now, last cycle, again, you see this pull. But what started to happen? We've seen the MACD for the first time recently flip negative as far as August. Once Bitcoin dominance broke that 50-week moving average, we see that MACD pretty much flip negative. And even though we could get some positive movements in Bitcoin dominance, even if it wants to go up a little bit higher, I truly believe that there's probably a 99% chance that even if Bitcoin dominance were to retest the highs, that the MACD is going to make a lower high, and that the strength overall for the MACD is still going to be pointing in a downward direction. So we have strength going to the downward direction. Do we have any other indicators to show us that underneath the hood, that's where Bitcoin dominance would want to go. We can take a look at the RSI. Here's the RSI showing that as well. You see how we've recently been oversold. And I mean, again, for comparison purposes, you can see this last cycle, these lower highs, these lower lows. We're seeing that on the MACD. We're seeing that bearish pull to the downside. I like to even take a look at the stochastic RSI. This is a lot going on, but if we even go to the monthly time frame, you can see how the stochastic RSI has these double bottoms. Now, this was showing a lot of bearishness before it happened, and by then we were getting bullish divergence. Again, you see these double bottoms here, and we just had our first bottom. Okay, so does that mean there's more time to go before we get, maybe a little rally and another dip? Maybe. The stochastic RSI can stay oversold for a while, but there's no two ways about it. We are seeing negative strength or negative momentum in the Bitcoin dominance. And so if Bitcoin dominance, to wrap all this up, if Bitcoin dominance is going down, all right, and we're going to be seeing more strength pulling towards our alts, if we are more risk on, the United States central bank balance sheet going to be adding to their balance sheet, all right? They're going to be doing QE. We're going to be having further rate cuts, okay? We're going to be having further rate cuts. The Fed's probably going to cut by another 25 basis points today. We have the Russell 2000, which is a good historic indicator as far as when we're risk on. We have the Russell 2000 in new recent all-time high territory, all right? This thing's still going up. We have all these factors to say we are still risk on. Eventually, I believe that is going to pull crypto up with it. So when I take a look at crypto, again, and I see where Bitcoin dominance is, all right, for comparisons, you can see, this peak that we had here in June of 25. Let's take a look at when we had our first Bitcoin dominance peak last cycle. Look at that, September 2019. Remember the quantitative tightening, quantitative easing flip, right when Bitcoin dominance peaked there. Again, we got that move a little early. We even saw that reflected in the Ethereum Bitcoin chart. Okay, so I believe the markets are front running high risk moves. And even before we get all that liquidity injected, I believe that during this AI bubble, if there's going to be any alt season to be made, we're going to be seeing these moves happening earlier than people think. So I take a look at these metrics, and that tells me, all this data tells me, that this cycle isn't broken. All right, you can take a look at it by time. And I used to take a look at crypto in the same way myself. I used to really consider that the 4-year cycle, it was just that easy. But over time, we started to see a divergence happen. The flow of money to an alt season was different, or it wasn't lining up with the classic 4-year cycle. Again, we're right here. We took a look at that on the charts. We can see that Ethereum Bitcoin, it is still in a macro uptrend. It is not finished yet. So we are seeing a little bit of a separation from the 4-year cycle. Remember what I said, bottom to top, each cycle gets a little longer. We keep increasing or adding to the amount of time each cycle. And that makes sense as far as a log regression goes. A log regression shows we are stretching horizontally the x-axis, which is time. And so to me, it kind of makes sense that the flow of money, it's going to take a little bit longer than some people are used to. And going back to Bitcoin dominance, as far as that flow of money, what we are looking for is increased rotation, and we would need Bitcoin to get too expensive to buy. Bringing it back to what I said earlier, once Bitcoin is too expensive to buy, then we get the alt season, right? Now, for Bitcoin to be too expensive, we need price to go up. All right, we need price to go up, and Bitcoin dominance, it can go up or down either way, but you see how that affects alts. If dominance and Bitcoin's going up compared to all the altcoins, they can stay at the same level, or money will rotate into Bitcoin. All right. If Bitcoin price is going up, but dominance is staying flat or going down, that means our altcoins are performing better than that of Bitcoin. And remember, we are in this Ethereum year. Okay. So even as Bitcoin, even if it's recovering, Ethereum might be recovering quicker than it. And remember, total 3 is showing us that we may be near somewhat of a bottom. Total 3 is bottomed around this 100-week moving average. I wonder if we have any MACD convergence. Now, we do have our first light red box here. Has that marked the bottom? It was close to a bottom back here. There was a light red box right here, okay, but our bottom came later around the second light red box. Again, last time we had a light red box here, but then it got a little bit deeper. And then our second light red box, that was confirmation. So, maybe just a little bit deeper, maybe total 3 is going to test that 100-week moving average a little bit more. But either way, if this is another MACD switch where we are going to move to the positive side soon, that's going to be very bullish for altcoins in the near future. Now, Bitcoin, it does have to get through that 95K level. We talked about this in Monday's video, where there's a lot of shorts stacked in at around 95K. We even took a look at the heat map, and you guys see that there. You see where the shorts are stacked in around 95K. So we have to contend with that. But again, macro-wise, Bitcoin starts to break up and out of here, we might see some more of that Bitcoin dominance rotation that we are looking for classically, how we get to in alt season. Now, what is important to remember is that even with quantitative easing coming back in, Bitcoin dominance, it could still go up. And there's a couple ways to look at it. Again, this might mean that Bitcoin is moving up compared to alts, and that altcoin liquidity is going over to Bitcoin, okay? Or it might just mean that Bitcoin is going up faster than altcoins can, right? Altcoins can have around the same price. Again, we can see that here with the lateral word right there. Bitcoin can go up at a much higher rate than that of altcoins. But again, watch for that divergence. Remember what I said on the MACD. Watch for Bitcoin to be getting into a euphoric state. Now, we've been down here in we've been down in fear for a little bit now. Now, imagine if all of a sudden Bitcoin starts getting above 100K again, and then it gets above 116K, and it continues to march higher, and people start to believe that the 4-year cycle is truly dead. You might see a rush of retail following large institution money back into Bitcoin to pump it to that 140, 150K area. So I believe we're in the type of condition that can flip to greed really quick. We flipped to fear really quick. Okay, we got down to extreme fear even when Bitcoin was above its 50-week moving average, right? We're in extreme fear, but we're not seeing one of these classic bottoms, okay? Remember what I said about let's bring it back to the seasonality. Remember what I said about these areas, 2018, 2022, okay? These were cycle bottoms. You can see they're 75% down. This was 2018. That was about 80% down, I believe. Okay, but 2019, COVID notwithstanding, this wasn't as big of a drop. It's still around a 50% drop, close to that. Okay, but remember, Bitcoin in 2019, we weren't above its former all-time highs. We are now. We are already above all-time highs. We've had a 36% drop, and we're down to the 100-week moving average. It's about a 36% drop when we measure it out perfectly. But you see, if this is, for all intents and purposes, similar to 2019 as far as inflationary monetary policy, we are already above the former all-time high. And so from the data I've seen, large money, Vanguard, they're buying these dips. They're buying these dips on Bitcoin. And I think even long term, anytime Bitcoin is at or under its 100-week moving average, it's a really great time to buy, if you are patient. So do keep an eye out for that. Do keep an eye out for the price action of Bitcoin dominance. I think we can flip to greed very fast under the right conditions. And if the Russell 2000 continues to pump up, quantitative easing comes back, I think all those conditions, again, similar to last cycle, will come into play again. And then we will see that rotation. And then if you're in the right altcoin, you might see some really strong gains in a short period of time. Picking the right altcoin is a very tough battle. I talk about on my channel. I try to measure altcoins based on risk and potential, right? So it's not an easy game to play, but that is something to watch for. And as far as what I see in all the macro data, as far as liquidity and the markets are concerned, and its reflection upon crypto, nothing is broken in my opinion. The flow of money, we are stuck in this phase 2 area right now, but we have not seen the full rotation of Bitcoin dominance, and nothing as far as our last 2 classic cycles have broken yet. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you believe in the 4-year cycle, or are you in more so my camp, where you believe we are in this secular bull run, this AI bubble, and that we need to pay more attention to the money flow? And the money flow, the faucet for liquidity, it is about to be opened up in a big way. And I do think, I'm probably being a contrarian here to most people. I do think that can be a very positive thing for crypto in 2026. We'll see. Maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful day. Take care.